Welcome to Recalculating Small Business. Like its award-winning book, Recalculating is dedicated to small business in America. Your hosts are Don Mazzella and Dan Perkins. Don Mazzella is the editor-in-chief of the Small Business Digest. Dan Perkins is a registered investment advisor with 43 years' experience in managing money.
Dan Perkins here, your co-host, along with Don Mazzella of Recalculating for Small Business. Our radio program is dedicated to you, helping the small business owners increase their profits. We draw our name from Recalculating, voted the best small business book of 2017 by the Independent Press. In this book, it features ways to grow your small business. Now, here's Don Mazzella.
Dan, hiring a new person is always something of a crapshoot. Perhaps the most viewed hiring process is the National Football League's annual draft. Charlie Wonderlic is the creator of the NFL draft pre-testing, and now he is revolutionizing hiring methods across general businesses. Charlie, welcome to our program.
Thank you, Don. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon.
Tell us a little bit more about your background and then how our small business audience can benefit from using your techniques.
Well, Don, Wonderlic is a multi-generation company. We're now into our fifth generation, and we have spent our careers trying to find ways to help businesses business owners, in fact, make better hiring decisions through the use of pre-employment tests.
Okay, and you created perhaps the most famous one with the NFL, but you also have some new ideas, and we have an audience of small business leaders, and hiring is such an important part of their success. How can you help them?
Well, Don, what we figured out over the past 70 years, and working with literally tens of thousands of small businesses, is that they typically don't have the same kind of human resource departments or hiring sophistication as larger employers. And so what we've done is found a way to make all those very complicated technological concepts available in a much easier to process, much quicker to implement manner. And so we've opened that up recently within the last 2 years to small businesses, so they can merely go to our website, sign up, and begin benefiting immediately from an improved hiring process versus waiting and talking to consultants and long implementation times.
Well, tell us one. This will be my last question. Then I'll turn it over to Dan. But tell us one thing that your website helps a small business. How can they use it to improve their hiring?
Well, Don, what we know is that there's different kinds of qualifications that employers look for different positions. And so what we did in the past was we would actually have a psychologist work with potential clients to figure out how to construct and identify the things that they should be doing for that job. Well, now those very same employers can merely go onto our website, select a position, and the software will automatically configure the appropriate assessments that should be used for that position, and also the right scoring ranges. So it really simplifies the whole process of making sure that the candidates that are applying for a specific job, whether it's an entry-level job or a more advanced job, have the requisite skills and capabilities.
Dan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Welcome, Charlie. I want to talk to you about personal experience. Many, many decades ago, I was working for an engineering company in Columbus, Ohio, and I was really dissatisfied with where my career was headed, and I went to an employment psychologist, and he helped me with a battery of tests, and to try and figure out if he could help me figure out what I should be doing with my life. And I wound up with an interview with Pitney Bowes and another interview with Merrill Lynch. And the difference, Merrill Lynch would pay me $1,000 a month with the opportunity to earn commission, and Pitney Bowes would pay me $35,000 a year as an area manager. And my psychologist said, employment psychologist, take the Merrill Lynch job. So because your psyche is that you need to re-stimulate yourself every about 2 years. When I went and applied and Merrill Lynch put an offer on the table, I went through, now this was back in the early 70s, so your company might have been the company that tested me. Anyway, I did a test, and the test came back, and it went to the sales manager for the office, and he said, I spent a number of hours talking with you, interviewing you, and according to the test, I shouldn't hire you. But I'm going to hire you because I see something that I can't see in the test. And fortunately for him and for me, I became the number one salesman in the company for my class the whole time I was in production, and took off when I went to New York, invited to New York to go do something. So these tests do have value, but they don't necessarily ensure success. Is that fair?
No, I think that's totally the key to understanding data, whether it's data that we're using in our everyday lives about how we want to drive our car from point A to point B using a system that says we think this is the best way based on the current traffic, or data that you could get when you're hiring people. The difference is the word people. People are complicated. They come to the table with a myriad of different life experiences, interests, personality types, skills, knowledge. So the trick is to try to make a decision to hire one of them. And so in the case of your hiring manager, the good news is in this particular case that he was able to look at some test result, whatever it might have been, which was what the data should do for him, and override it, because he is a human. But to just have no data points to say, well, if we can't have 100% confidence in all of our data points, we won't look at data, would be silly as well. So the trick, I think, for any business person looking at adding data is it contributing to something, and then how perfect is it when it comes to the business goals that we have. And predicting human performance is one of the most difficult, obviously.
Yeah, and the reason why I asked you the question was because I'm wondering, the 40-some years ago when the sales manager interviewed me and I went through a battery of tests, I wonder if the instincts of people hiring today, they depend more and more on the test and less on their instincts. Have we refined our instincts about judging people, or have we become more dependent on test scores?
Well, I think the internet and the ease of application for anyone now has so increased the number of candidates per job opening that traditional methods of phone call, on-site interview are impossible for many. I mean, we talk to clients who are small business owners who will run an ad for an entry-level position and get 100 candidates. So unless they have some way of getting to the top candidates quickly, which is really what this is about, it's not excluding the others, it's just trying to identify which one should I get on the phone with now, makes the difference between them being competitive and making great hires or losing to the competition that's better at it than they are. So I don't know that it's as much how do we use a test to make sure we get the A player. It's really how do we use objective information that we can gather using all these new technologies. The internet is one that really adds efficiency to the whole process. But not just we need more than just efficiency. We need efficiency that comes with some quantitative information that we can rely on.
Yeah, we had a situation during the Obama years where there were a lot more people looking for jobs than there were jobs. And now we're finding in some areas of the country the unemployment rate is down to below 2.5%, and many companies are desperately looking for people and are having difficulty finding them. So as the economy grows and expands and consumes more and more people, does it make the hiring practice even more difficult?
Man, Dan, you've got all the right questions, I tell you.
I only get paid for the good
I mean,
ones. I don't get paid for the bad ones.
It's like a triple-edged sword because, employment is down, so employers need, they're looking and it's harder to find. But I think the other trend that's just inescapable is that the jobs are becoming more complex, not less. So at the same time that the supply of job candidates is going down, at least from those that were previously unemployed, now we're trying to fill them with people that can quickly learn new things, new technologies, new ways of doing business. Everything is changing. The rate of change is so rapid that the importance of making good hiring decisions is dramatically different. And so again, it speaks to the same thing. It's sort of like your small businesses that have really good internal technical capabilities for their CRM or their accounting or whatever it is. It's a competitive advantage. If they have the same thing when it comes to their people process, they will be in an advantage to those that don't. Period.
Well, I'll ask you another question, then I'll turn it back to Don. I'm curious because I've talked to people, not necessarily who've done testing like your company does, but recruiters, and we spent some time talking about farming the recently retired, the people who've left the workforce, and they find out that retirement isn't as much as it was cracked up to be. And corporations seem to have some degree of reluctance of going out and trying to find people in the various communities of retirees. But I'm wondering if that, again, because of the shortage of people, if that's going to change.
I think again you're the diminished supply, but bringing it back to the concept of data and quantitative information and assessments. The one of the other values of taking sort of a blind approach where you're assessing people for a job before you're interviewing them is it will enable those qualified seniors or those qualified people, regardless of age, race, sex, national origin, to get their foot in the door. So, even if an organization inappropriately had a reluctance to hire somebody on the basis of their age, the first introduction they're going to get to that candidate is that they're either qualified or they're not. And so I think really that's what it boils down to is employers need to hire qualified people more so now than ever before, number one. That's just true. And it's more difficult to find them. So we as a country, as small businesses for sure, have to get good at this. We have to get real good at it. We have to think about doing things differently than we've done in the past. And that could include hiring people who are older. It could include hiring people that are remote. We aren't dictating the way that the ways of employment. We're sort of have to follow it. And if we can at least stay competitive with the benefits and pay that are offered by larger companies, that's what it's going to take. And being good at hiring is one of those things.
One quick follow-up, if I could, Don, just give me 1 minute here. Is part of the challenge of hiring people who have retired is that they could be, quote, overqualified for the job?
I think I don't know that. Obviously, it's a very interesting question. I'm not sure that I'm necessarily qualified to answer it, but I would certainly say that part of a fit between a person and a job is compensation. And so, typically if somebody's more advanced in their career, they might be looking for more compensation than a more entry-level role would have. If that was what it was about, if they were going for an equivalent role, then no, I don't personally see that is a disadvantage. But then again, my hiring decisions are usually based on these really quantitative. I'd rather take someone who's super qualified and they know they're super qualified, and I really don't care what age, race, sex, national origin they are, and it works out really well for me.
Good. Don, back to you.
We're talking with Charles Wonderlic. Your website, Charlie?
Is Wonderlic.com. Wonder, L-I-C.
Spell it out fully for our audience, please.
WONDERLIC. Wonderlic.com.
Thank you. My question is, you know that also from your students you'll be taught. What do you try to teach your users about using a test like that and using their judgment? What are some of the traits you like to see in your clients, not the employees, but the clients themselves?
Well, Don, what we've done over the years as we've moved what we do from being paper-based to PC to now online is we've tried to make it as simple as possible for an end user to understand how to compare people for a given role. And at this point, what we do is we do a variety of different online assessments that the candidate completes off-site and self-service. And then we literally compare all of the candidates that have applied for that job and give them a ranking against each other so that it's very easy to see which are the most and which are the least qualified for that role.
Well, you know, I just read recently that and I'm sorry I can't remember where, that two CEOs were talking and they both agreed that the one thing that they wanted in people was imaginative people who are willing to work hard. How do you measure such tassel traits as that?
Well, what we look at, there's different areas of assessment, and the one that you're referring to would be more like a personality. You might have heard of these personality measures, and they're measuring what people are like, what they enjoy doing, and that's one area of assessment that would get into things like, you know, are they creative, are they introverted, extroverted, those softer things. There are other kinds of assessments that measure knowledge. What do you know? If you were hiring somebody who's going to be working with Microsoft Office, you could test them to make sure they actually knew. Again, nothing to do with creativity, but the interesting thing there, well, if they were doing creative writing, you would be able to identify, are they a creative type of person, and do they have the writing skills? And then another component, which is included in this approach that we take, is their ability to learn. And so different roles have different mental challenges, and I would think that if it was a creative writer, you'd look for somebody that was creative, that had writing skills, and that could originate because you believe that they were bright enough to do that.
Very, very true. Now I'm going to throw a curve at you, and we can take this off the tape because it is a controversial subject, and I don't. By using tests like this, you will eliminate, you become colorblind in many respects. But I guess my question is, do you find any different? There's much talk in this world about education and the various differences between blacks and whites, etc. But do your tests try to smooth out that differences so there is no prejudice involved because it's all a test rather than a viewership?
Absolutely. So we do know that the academic achievement distribution across different races is different, and for whatever reason it's true. So if an employer is merely using that, the likelihood is very high that they might not have very good representation of employees in their neighborhood. But the other thing that's also really, really true is when you're using objective assessment where job candidates are completing these assessments off-site, you have no idea who they are. All you see is how qualified they are, and you're making your decisions on that basis. So there would be no way that anybody could make a claim that they were discriminated against, at least at that point. Now, what happens is when they come in for the interview, now we are subject to those same potential biases as interviewers that we had before, but at least we've got a lot more information. In the case of Dan's question about, older workers coming back into the workplace, that qualitatively would help us as interviewers know which one factually appears to be the most competent.
Well, let me ask you a question now. How do you charge for your services for a small business?
We have our service is all inclusive. It's called One Score, and it's a monthly fee for an employer who employs. It's based on the number of employees, and it's $120 a month for the full service for all of their hiring needs. And the price goes up based on the number of employers that are employed by that particular client. So it's a monthly all-inclusive fee for the full service.
That $120, how many employees can you have to hit that number?
Well, that would be up to 10, I think, and then once it goes to 25, it's $150 a month. But we're not finding that price is not. That's the beautiful thing about what we're doing with the internet and enabling what was very expensive and time-consuming and required a lot of assistance in terms of labor on our side. We've made the entire process self-service, so employers can just go to the site, they can take a trial, sign up, and begin using very immediately at very little, $120 a month. That's for all of their hiring. They can qualify hundreds of people.
Wow.
Go ahead.
After you tell our audience again the website, I'm going to turn it back to Dan.
The website is called Wonderlic.com with no K.
Dan, back to you.
Thank you. So, in listening to what you're discussing with Don, if we think in terms of trying to find a qualified people, and in my earlier session with you, we talked about technology complemented by intuition and experience and hunches and pure guessing and dumb luck and all those things that can go into a hiring process. If we look at what's going on in our country as it relates to the desire for people to want to be able to go to college, and looking at the fact that 40% don't complete, something like at least half of the other 60% are taking 5.5 to 6 years to complete the degrees. Are corporations beginning to unweight the advantage of college degrees, and are they start looking now for other things?
I don't know if it's necessarily unweight, but they're struggling to figure out how to compare and contrast candidates across schools, across programs, using academic credentials. And at the same time, educational attainment has gone up quite a bit, as has grade inflation. So now we've got this challenge where if you're using, high school grades or college, which college should you go to, what were your grades, what was your major, what was your minor, if you're using those things as the sole barometer of knowledge or job knowledge or capabilities to succeed in the job, you're at a pretty big disadvantage, because you can have people that graduated from less well-known colleges that have more mastery of the subject matter than those that haven't. So I think that this trend of relying exclusively on academic attainment is completely changing. And so, again, this is a really appropriate use of assessment, because what the assessments that we use typically have nothing to do with educational attainment. Educational attainment is certainly a plus, but it doesn't modify the test scores. So they're used as a supplement to, right.
Sure. One just little sidelight. I was listening to a guy on another show. I was on a panel, and he was talking about warning small business people about hiring college graduates. And he said, if you find a college graduate whose degree ends in studies, might not be a good choice for you. You know, whether it's female studies or art studies or whatever it is, that you may not have a good fundamental, quote, liberal arts education with a person who has a degree of studies, whatever it is. And so is it important to understand what it is the person's degree is in before you, do you weigh that into the hiring practices?
Yeah, again, it would be job specific. So if I were hiring an accountant that had to know what, ASC 606 is or how to perform accounting functions, whether they learn that on the job or they learn that by going to school, that's like a prerequisite. I'm not in the business of teaching them accounting. I want to hire an accountant. So I think that in many cases where skills, the skills that you bring to the table, you need to be proficient, then the employer's got to validate that they actually have those skills. At the same time, there are many positions that aren't that really isn't the skill or background that the person brings to the table, but their ability to learn on the job and become proficient, to be a team player, to some of those more generic things that we think about that most employers are looking for to fill 95% of their job openings. In those cases, I don't care if it ends with studies. I don't care necessarily what school they went to. I'm looking for the most qualified people.
There was a report that I saw a number of years ago where the difference between the American job culture and the Japanese job culture as it relates to people with degrees, the Japanese don't care what you learn because they're going to put you through their training program and teach you what you need to know, as much as they want people who have had the experience of going to school and learning. If they've demonstrated abilities to learn, they'll teach them what they need to do to do the job. So they're not looking for a highly skilled, educated person to take over a particular job. And I'm wondering whether that's, again, as we've talked now a couple of times on this program about the shortage of people, do you see that corporations, because of the shortage of quote, qualified people, are lowering their standards?
No, I see they're learning. What they're doing is they're going after. Very few. Only the most inept employer is going after people who are unemployed. And so that battle is over. So when we talk about unemployment and that it was easier to hire an unemployed, well, you were hiring unemployed people. They were unemployed for a reason, oftentimes not their own fault, but sometimes because they didn't have the skills and they were let go or whatever. So what's happening now is the war is being fought on the passive job seeker, and it's attracting passive job seekers to look and explore. And that's what's happening today. Is are you done?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So that's what's happening today. So the employers that are out there fighting that war, what they're doing is they're creating an employer brand.
Right.
And they're making it easy for job candidates to apply. And that's really what technology is doing as well. Is a candidate can actually go to many employers now, go to their website, and not just send an email saying I'm interested, but actually go through a pre-qualification process.
Yeah.
So it benefits.
Okay, Don.
Benefits both.
Thank you. Back to you, Don.
Thank you, Dan.
It's absolutely been fascinating. Charlie, I just have one more question. Given that we're so internet focused today, what's happened to the one-on-one personal type of interviewing that was so much a part of when I was looking for a job? Is that gone, or are you still doing that?
That's alive and well. I know very few employers that will not conduct an interview. It's just that they're not conducting the interview as the first step. They're saving that. But yeah, that's alive and well.
I said the question wrong. I remember I had to go to an office and sit in front of it with a proctor to take the test. Now, is that still happening? I meant that type of test.
Yeah, that's still happening, but that's primarily for very high stakes certification related. So if you're getting, a broker's license or taking an entrance exam, but it's the vast majority of tests that are being used for pre-employment purposes are either being administered unproctored by the take the candidates completing them from whatever computer they wish to have that's got an internet connection, or that they will go to the employer and the employer will administer secured test on site. That tends to be much less expensive for both the candidate and for the employer to administer those tests locally.
Oh, we've been talking with Charles Wonderlic, of the Wonderlic. You're saying now, how many generations have been with this company?
Well, the company was started by my grandfather, Al Wonderlic, in 1937. My father ran the business in the 50s and 60s. I started running the business in the 80s, and now I have two of my boys in the business with us. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I said 5. We're 4. 4 generations.
Well, at some point we're going to have you and your sons back to talk about generational change.
And we would love that, Don. And there's many to talk about.
Yes, we know, because that's an issue that comes up many of our emails. But for the moment, Charles Wonderlic, we thank you so much for joining us. A link to your website will be on recalculating.biz tonight, where you can hear every one of our programs. And we thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Don, and thank you, Dan. And I definitely look forward to coming back, and we'd love to have the boys, my father and I, join you on that multi-generational. It would be very exciting, to say the least.
We think it will be, too. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Dan, final word?
No, thank you so much. Very helpful. Very helpful.
Thank you, Dan.
Want to know more about health savings accounts for your company or yourself? Go to 2hsa.com and get a free employer's primer. Health savings accounts are a cost-effective way of offering health care benefits to your employees and yourself. HSAs build retirement funds for your employees, improve morale, and reduce your health care benefit cost. For a free employer guide to HSAs, go to 2hsa.com. That's 2hsa.com.
Dan Perkins here from recalculating.biz. I want to tell you about Bob Bethel. Bob's new book is Strengthen Your Business, Fail-Proof Strategies for Small Business. His suggestions are easy to understand and very helpful. Bob Bethel's book, Strengthen Your Business, can be found at Amazon.com or can be ordered at your local bookstore. Dan Perkins with your featured book.
Welcome back to Recalculating, the program dedicated to American small business. Now it's time to bring together our two experts, Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella, as they discuss things that are happening now that are affecting your business success.
Dan, Will Herman has co-authored a terrific tome, The Startup Playbook. It's here in front of me, and I've been reading it, and it's really terrific. He's here now to talk about some of the ways new entrepreneurs can better ensure success. First, Will, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you came to write the book with your partner.
Thanks, Don. Great to be here. My partner and I have started 15, 16 companies between us. We've invested in about 100 more and have advised hundreds more after that. Over the years of doing this, we've realized that the problems that these small companies run into are pretty much the same from case to case to case. And that we found that nobody's really written down the advice that many can give to help these small companies out. There's sort of this tribal knowledge that's existed for years but isn't broadly distributed. tips, tactics, secrets on how to do these things. And so we thought we should step up and write it all down.
Okay, having said that, what are the one or two top things you've discovered that startups should do but haven't done?
Well, the top two. Building a solid team. This almost sounds like a Doe moment. It's we all hear about how important teams are and how critical the constitution of a team is, but it really is highly correlated. The quality of the team that starts the company is highly correlated with its ultimate success. So that's one point. Another is that the VCs in the world, the venture capitalists of the world, have really tried to pump the idea that spending as much money as you possibly can and moving as fast as you can is the only way to create a successful startup. And we just don't believe that's true, and we don't see that's true in the companies we work with either. We find the companies that spend time, move slowly at the beginning, ultimately move as faster than anybody else does. And they also spend less money getting started doing it. If these companies understand who their customers are, what their value proposition is, can they build a team, can they differentiate themselves and understand how to go to market, among other things, they can actually move much faster, spend less money, and optimize their chances for success.
I have a lot more questions, but I'm going to turn it over now to Dan. Dan, it's all yours.
Thank you. Welcome, sir. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Dan.
I'm fascinated with what you're saying because I have built not as many businesses you have, but I've invested in a lot of businesses over the 44 years that I've been managing money, and I'm actually involved in a startup right now, and
terrific.
Which is and Don is about to convert a nonprofit to a for-profit, one of his ventures. One of the things that I'm finding in this new startup, and this particular new startup has proven patent technology that can virtually eliminate CO2 emissions from fossil-based fuels. So it is a very, very major game changer. But what I've found with my partner, and we're providing investment counsel and other factors, is that the people who are in control of the company today have either an engineering background or a medical background. They're very smart people, but with some aspects of the business, they're very uninformed, uneducated, and inexperienced. So in looking at, we're talking about money right now, and I know we're talking about a second round, but it seems to me that I listened to what you said with Don, and I'm not going to argue with you. It just seems to me improbable, but I'm willing to listen and learn, that all these companies all have, regardless of the business that they're in, have common traits of either success or failure. Is that what you're really saying? Is it that obvious?
Yeah, I think so. I understand where you're coming from, but for example, the case of engineering folks or scientific folks who start a company and later struggle because they don't know how to manage the company. Well, that's a pretty common occurrence. It's not to say that it happens in every company, but that's a pretty common occurrence. As you can imagine, and as I'm sure you've seen, cash flow issues are an umbrella of a problem that a huge percentage of the companies that fail run into, and some of the ones that succeed and get through it for some reason. Just people management, building teams. When it's sort of a Pareto's law kind of thing that 20% of the issues actually cause 80% of the problems. So
wow.
Are there exceptions? Yeah, there are exceptions. Of course there are exceptions. There's always exceptions that, unique problem that especially a very technical company gets into. But when you look at the umbrella of problems, and again, this is doing some rough cutting of the problems, but they really are quite similar. And by the way, we don't claim that if you take our advice or anybody's advice and follow it to a T, that all of a sudden you will be a success. I mean, our view is the odds are stacked heavily against you. 90% of companies fail, startups fail. And our goal is to just say, hey, look at what we've learned. Look at what other people have learned. If you add that into the mix, we'll shift the odds in your favor a bit. So there's nothing out there. Anybody who claims that they can say, follow my advice and you'll be successful is,
right.
They're charlatans. They're snake oil salesmen. But can you make it a 30% chance of succeeding? I'm quantifying something that's not quantifiable. A 40% chance of succeeding? We think you can do that.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you one more question before I turn it back to Don, Will.
Of course.
We've had a lot of people who provide on this program over the last year and a half or so who help people with startups and identify problems just as you've talked about. And they come from different specialties, whether it's sales and marketing or human resources or whatever. But the thing that seems to be coming back time and time again is that the principal reason why a business fails is not that they have a bad idea, is that they're undercapitalized. They don't have a realistic outlook as to how long it will take them to become profitable. Is that on your list?
Yeah, totally. Although I think that's a broader view than can be taken in reality. We actually are not strong on ideas. We think a well executed poor idea has a much better chance of success than a crappily executed great idea. So, ideas aren't a big deal to, we don't believe they're fundamental. Obviously, a great idea is great, but you don't have to have one. But the undercapitalization, there's certainly undercapitalization that happens where even if you're running the company out of a dumpster, you're spending no money to move forward, you can run out of money. If you've got too much money, more often than not, what we see is companies get too much money and then they run out of money because their pace is different or their sensitivity to cash utilization is different. So when we say undercapitalized, I agree, but I think there's lots of versions of undercapitalized. Sometimes they had plenty of money, they just had a horrible job of executing and burned too much capital, which in turn makes them undercapitalized, if that makes sense at all.
In your playbook, you talk many things, but first off, what's your website for the book? And I know you can get it on Amazon, but do you have your own website?
Yes, we do, and actually it's probably the easiest place to find it. Of course, you can do a search on Amazon, but our website is startup-playbook.com. That's STARTUP-playbook, PLAYBOOK.com.
Well, looking through your book as I did, I came up. You answered a lot of questions, but what are the 2 or 3 top questions you've gotten over the years from people who come to you for money?
For money, that's a good way of asking. The biggest one is how do we raise money? It's the single biggest question startups have these days. Is the environment now has been, if you look at accelerators and incubators and venture capitalists and angel investors, everybody is all about raise money. So the highest sensitivity for people is raising money. In fact, in our book, when we have a whole section on how to raise money, but it's actually fairly late in the book. And, but our opening paragraph is, you probably came here first, right? It's because everybody's so sensitive to it. So the number one question people have is, how do I raise as much money as I can at the highest valuation I can, as early as I can? And we discourage people from doing that. We think that you can raise less money, give away less of your company, and actually maximize things better by moving a little slower at the beginning. The other question is that we get often is, hey, I'm an introverted person. Can I run a company? Can I be CEO of a company? And our idea is that, being an extrovert makes it a little easier, but it's not required. We think it's actually better to be an influencer, somebody who's, empathetic and understands people and can basically manipulate people along the way. And that's, you can be an influencer without being an extrovert. And, it's just shaping the environment to help you sell. And I'll just throw in one last thing. I know I'm going a little long here, but the other is, how do I need co-founders, and how do I find co-founders? And, as I said before, we're really huge, really big on teams and going through a process of finding your own weaknesses and then filling it in with other team members rather than just pulling, your best friend off the street to help you out doing it.
I often think your best friend is your worst partner.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
It's true. But let me toss a controversial question at you now. There's a lot of talk about women in business, et cetera. And there's some studies out that seem to indicate that women have a greater propensity for starting businesses, but a tougher time finding the right combination of employees and financing. What have you found in your experience?
I certainly found that there are more women-run startups now than ever before. In fact, I'm very active in two accelerators in the Boston area, and almost half the teams now are women. And so it's great to see. It's certainly they have a different take on success and how to build a company, and I think it's refreshing. I have not seen myself. I've read the studies. I've not seen myself any funding difficulties that are particular among women. That's not to say they don't happen. In fact, I think now is a great time for women to be starting companies because there are many investors who are actively looking for women to invest in, because of what we're hearing now.
I'm going to ask one more question and turn it back to Dan. Many of the startups we've seen are, in fact, computerized ways of replacing tedious tasks. But what do you think are the two or three most fertile area for startups that you've run across and you think for the next 2 or 3 years?
It's pretty broad. Certainly robotics or AI in general. To your point of replacing tedious tasks, building machines, whether they're physical or virtual, to replace many things that humans do that are repetitive, are certainly hot areas. Right now, and I'll add to that, right now in cryptocurrency, anything that has Ethereum or Bitcoin associated with it or involved is hot. Whether it should be or not, I question. But I'd say those two areas are getting a lot of traction these days.
Back to you, Dan.
Thank you. Well, I want to change direction a little bit and say to you, in the hundreds of interviews that Don and I have done on this show, the vast majority of people who are starting businesses have abandoned the idea of building bricks and mortar and are trying to build internet businesses only. They feel like it's less capital, they can get to the market quicker, and they can establish a niche or a market share. And so I'm curious as to whether you still believe there's great opportunity for starting businesses in the internet, or has that cycle passed?
It's hard to see, given the cost structure of brick and mortar, it's hard to see that cycling back in any great way. I actively work with one company in Boston called Lovepop, Lovepop. They're a greeting card company, and they've taken a contrarian view, and they sell on the internet, of course, but they've also created small kiosks and pop-up stores everywhere that they sell. And it's been quite successful for them. So while I think the economics of having a physical presence really make it an impossibility for a lot of businesses, there are businesses that can probably take more advantage of it now because of the dearth of physical presence of retail now. I think, but another way to look at it is, I think it's very hard to raise capital when you have a physical presence. It's the venture capitalists really don't think it's a great way of going.
They don't want to invest in bricks and mortar.
Yeah.
So de facto, the source of money is driving the market for money towards internet-based businesses as opposed to bricks and mortar. Is that a fair assessment?
Well said. Yes, that is.
Okay.
That is.
The other thing is, and I think we've just got a few more minutes left. The other thing is, in looking at businesses, we see, we had on our program several months ago the founder of a company called Ring, R-I-N-G, and he was on promoting his new security device, which was a doorbell with a built-in camera. And we had him when he was still a private company, a startup, and he came public and wound up selling his business for $1 billion. It was an internet-based business. And I'm wondering is we see billion-dollar acquisitions, but I'm wondering if there are opportunities for $100,000, $5, $10 million acquisitions in the internet structure. You don't see much talk about consolidation and mergers and activities in the smaller segments of the middle market. But what do you think about that as a possibility of acquiring market share and distribution?
Yeah, it's totally, not only is it totally possible, it happens all the time. We only hear about the unicorns that are sold, and those are the ones that get all the publicity. But the vast majority of acquisitions are done between $75 and $100 million, and there are plenty between $10 and $75 million. So there's a lot of stuff that's being sucked up very quickly by larger companies, but there are so many startups now. It's only the ones that have formalized their product and formalized their channel and formalized their target market. If they look like they're on the verge of very fast growth, so they're all prepared, they've done all the hard work and on the verge of very fast growth, then there's a huge market out there, huge number of companies that are looking to acquire them.
Yeah. The interesting thing, and I know we're almost out of time, but the interesting thing to me is the fundamental shift that's taking place at Amazon with opening storefronts, acquiring marketplace in the case of a food distribution, where they're acquiring bricks and mortar and trying to not only keep the bricks and mortar but integrate it into their online businesses. That would seem to me to be a tough cultural shift to have built your business based on the internet and not bricks and mortar to make a decision that you're going to go into bricks and mortar by spending billions of dollars to acquire bricks and mortar distribution. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. My guess is the trick there, and I'm only guessing. My guess is that you acquire them and then run them as independently as possible, so you don't actually, you don't actually spoil the water of the other side of the business strategy. Obviously, you want to leverage off of each other, but they're not. It's not the same managing an internet business and managing a brick and mortar business. I can't imagine that Whole Foods guys would be any good at managing Amazon Web Services and vice versa. So you need a whole different set of talents.
Yeah. Okay, Don, back to you.
Thank you. We have a short amount of time, but in reading your book and in listening to you're very strong into wanting planning that a lot of entrepreneurs often neglect. Am I right on that point? Or
You are. It's the cornerstone. We actually think you can, by planning better up front, you can move faster later. You can scale your company faster later.
We're talking with Will Herman, whose book, the Startup Playbook, is available. Will, your website again?
Startup-Playbook.com.
Well, with just about a minute left, what advice would you give someone who's just planning right now to jump off that cliff and become a startup entrepreneur?
Well, aside from reading our book, I would say don't do it alone. Even if you haven't formulated your idea yet, pull together a group of people that can help you, and as a team, start to build the company from scratch.
That's great advice. Again, we're talking with Will Herman. And name your partner.
Rajat Bhargava.
And the two of you have worked together in the past?
We've never actually operationally worked together. I've been on a couple of his boards, and I was an investor in his very first company about 25 years ago.
Well, that's a good way to have the experience to write a book. Dan, do you have any last-minute thoughts?
No, as an author, you start at the beginning and you hopefully take people on a journey to the end. This is kind of a self-help book. Is it designed? Did you way that you wrote the book to start at the beginning, or are there certain things that you should be reading not necessarily out of sequence in this book because of what it is you're trying to do? Is there any kind of an evaluation?
Yeah, sorry. We wrote it so you could poke into it anywhere, but we believe it's best to read it straight through because we start off by challenging people to understand themselves and to see if they really should be creating a startup. And before you're past that, because it's for first-time entrepreneurs, it's really nothing else matters. So reading it straight through is a good idea, but hopefully we've done a good enough job that you can later use it as a reference book as well.
Super. Thank you, sir.
Well, Herman, thank you so much for being with us. It's been illuminating. Thank you.
Thank you. Don, Dan, thanks so much for the time. I appreciate it.
We have been talking with Will Herman, the co-author of the Startup Playbook. A link to his website will be on www.recalculating.biz tonight. On our website, you can also hear recordings of every Recalculating show. You can email us at editor@recalculating.biz.
Thank you for joining us on Recalculating. We hope the information you received on today's episode was helpful to you in starting and growing your business. Please go to our website, recalculating.biz, to contact us, to listen to past shows, and see special offers. Until next time, remember, If you grow, we grow. Join us next week for more helpful ideas to make your business a great success. Recalculating, a program designed to help you be successful.